The heavy dusk settled over the river, while the air seemed to stop for a second. A police officer, called to a scene, walks quickly through the woods to the isolated bank. Tied up in a surprise attack, he is thrown into the shallow water, unable to breathe. His groans are muffled by the rope that binds him, sinking deeper with each passing second. From the top of the bank, the police dog growls, eyes fixed on the scene as if calculating its next move. In the background, the figures vanish into the darkness, leaving only the sound of the river. The officer, with his head submerged, struggled against his own breath, while the dog prepared to dive. But what would happen next? No one would be there to tell love stories with animals. Then subscribe now and don't miss a single one. Thank you for following along. Now, back to our story. The heavy evening air pressed down on Cedar Falls like a thick blanket, carrying with it an almost imperceptible sense that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Officer Jake Morrison followed his usual patrol route through the quiet streets of the small Oregon town, but despite his attempts to maintain routine, an uncomfortable feeling gnawed at the back of his mind. His trained instincts whispered that someone was watching him, though nothing in his surroundings seemed to confirm this suspicion. Beside him in the patrol car, Rex, his German Shepherd partner, growled low and kept his dark eyes fixed on the dense thicket that bordered the main road leading toward the Cascade River. The dog's ears were pricked forward, alert to some threat that remained invisible to human senses. Jake had learned to trust Rex's instincts over the past 3 years. They'd worked together, and the animal's uncharacteristic restlessness sent a chill down his spine. "What is it, boy?" Jake murmured, reaching over to scratch behind Rex's ears. The dog barely acknowledged the gesture, his attention completely focused on something beyond the tree line. That silent uneasiness was already a harbinger that this night would not unfold like so many others in their peaceful mountain community. Jake had been a police officer in Cedar Falls for 8 years, ever since he'd returned from his tour of duty overseas. The transition from military to civilian law enforcement had been challenging, but this small town had welcomed him with open arms. Mayor Patricia Wells had personally recruited him, impressed by his service record and his genuine desire to protect and serve. The community had become his home, and its residents felt like extended family. The radio crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. "Unit 7, we have a possible situation near the old Miller Bridge by the river. Requesting immediate response." Jake recognized the voice of dispatch operator Sarah Chen, but something in her tone seemed different tonight, more urgent than usual. He grabbed the radio. "Unit 7 responding." "What's the nature of the situation, Sarah?" "Reports of suspicious activity near the riverbank. Anonymous tip came in about 10 minutes ago. Proceed with caution." Rex's ears perked up even higher at the sound of the radio, and he began pacing back and forth across the back seat of the patrol car. Jake had never seen his partner this agitated before. The dog seemed to sense that whatever awaited them at the river was far more significant than a routine call. As Jake turned the patrol car toward Miller Bridge, his mind began processing the details. The old bridge had been a focal point of the community for decades, spanning the Cascade River at its narrowest point. During the day, it was popular with fishermen and hikers, but at night it was usually deserted. The fact that someone had called in suspicious activity there struck him as unusual. The drive to the bridge took 15 minutes through winding mountain roads. Jake kept his windows down, listening to the sounds of the forest and watching for any signs of unusual activity. Rex remained tense beside him, occasionally whimpering softly as if trying to communicate something urgent. The dog's behavior was becoming more concerning by the minute. "Talk to me, Rex," Jake said softly. "You've been acting strange all evening. What's got you so worked up?" Rex turned to look at his partner, his intelligent brown eyes seeming to convey a warning that Jake couldn't quite interpret. The bond between them had been forged through countless hours of training and years of working side by side. Rex had saved Jake's life more than once, finding suspects hiding in dangerous places and alerting him to threats he might have missed. If Rex was this upset, there was definitely something wrong. As they approached the bridge area, Jake slowed the patrol car and began scanning the surrounding landscape more carefully. The Cascade River meandered through a valley surrounded by towering pine trees and rocky outcroppings. During the spring snowmelt, the water could be treacherous. But in late autumn like this, it flowed more gently, creating peaceful pools and shallow rapids. Jake parked near the bridge approach and stepped out of the car, immediately releasing Rex from the back seat. The dog jumped down and began sniffing the ground intently, following some scent trail that led toward the riverbank. His tail was rigid and his muscles were tense with anticipation. "Find it, Rex," Jake commanded, using the search command they'd practiced hundreds of times during training. Rex immediately began working in a systematic pattern, nose to the ground, covering the area around the bridge with professional thoroughness. The evening shadows were growing longer, and Jake switched on his flashlight to better illuminate the area. The beam cut through the gathering darkness, revealing the familiar landscape of weathered stone and rushing water. Everything appeared normal, but Jake had learned to trust Rex's senses over his own eyes. Rex suddenly stopped near a cluster of boulders at the water's edge and began barking sharply, the sound echoing off the surrounding hills. Jake hurried over to investigate, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his radio. Whatever Rex had found, it was significant enough to warrant backup. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, shining his flashlight where Rex was focused. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just rocks and shallow water. But as he looked more carefully, he noticed something that made his heart rate quicken. There, partially hidden among the rocks, was a waterproof package wrapped in plastic. It looked like it had been deliberately placed there, positioned in a way that would keep it dry, but still accessible to someone who knew where to look. Rex was circling around it, whining softly and looking back at Jake as if to say, "I found what you were looking for." Jake approached the package carefully, using his flashlight to examine it from multiple angles before touching it. His police training had taught him to treat any unknown object as potentially dangerous, but his instincts told him this was something different. The package appeared to contain documents or papers, carefully sealed against the elements. As he reached for his radio to call for backup, a sound from the forest made both Jake and Rex freeze. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but definitely the sound of someone moving through the underbrush. Rex's ears swiveled toward the noise, and his lips pulled back in a silent snarl. Jake drew his flashlight in the direction of the sound, but the beam revealed nothing but trees and shadows. However, he could feel the presence of someone watching them, just as he had earlier during his patrol. The anonymous tip that had brought them here suddenly took on a more sinister meaning. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice carrying across the water. "Cedar Falls Police. If someone's out there, please identify yourself." The only response was the gentle sound of water flowing over rocks and the whisper of wind through pine needles, but Rex remained alert, his body language indicating that whoever was out there was still present, still watching. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting for backup, he carefully picked up the waterproof package, noting its weight and the way it had been sealed. Whatever was inside, someone had gone to great lengths to ensure it would survive exposure to the elements. As he stood up with the package in his hands, Rex suddenly bolted toward the tree line, barking furiously. Jake spun around just in time to see a figure disappearing into the shadows, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who knew these woods well. Jake's heart pounded as he watched the mysterious figure vanish into the dense forest. Rex returned to his side, panting heavily but still alert, his eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The silence that followed felt oppressive, as if the very woods were holding their breath. "Good boy, Rex," Jake whispered, reaching down to pat his partner's head while keeping his eyes fixed on the spot where the figure had disappeared. The waterproof package felt heavier in his other hand now, weighted with implications he was only beginning to understand. Jake activated his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need backup at Miller Bridge immediately. We have a possible suspect who fled into the woods near the river." Sarah's voice crackled back through the radio, but this time Jake noticed something he had missed before, a slight hesitation, almost as if she was choosing her words carefully. Copy that. Unit 7. Backup is en route. Estimated arrival time 15 minutes. 15 minutes seemed like an eternity. In a town the size of Cedar Falls, backup should have been no more than 5 minutes away from any location. Jake frowned, wondering why it was taking so long. Officer Tommy Martinez usually worked the evening shift and should have been somewhere nearby. Rex suddenly stiffened again, his attention focused back toward the bridge. Jake followed his gaze and saw headlights approaching from the direction of town, but instead of the familiar white patrol car with its distinctive red and blue light bar, a dark sedan was pulling up to the bridge area. "Stay close, Rex," Jake murmured, instinctively moving behind a large boulder that would provide cover. Something about this situation felt wrong, and his military training had taught him to trust those instincts. The sedan stopped near Jake's patrol car, and a figure emerged from the driver's seat. In the dim light, Jake could see it was a man in civilian clothes, but there was something familiar about his silhouette. As the figure moved closer to the patrol car and began looking around, Jake realized with a shock that he recognized him. It was Detective Marcus Thompson from the County Sheriff's Department. Marcus had worked with the Cedar Falls Police Department on several cases over the years, and Jake had always respected him as a thorough and honest investigator. But what was Marcus doing here now, and why hadn't dispatch mentioned that a detective was responding to the call? Jake watched as Marcus examined his patrol car and then began scanning the area with a powerful flashlight. The detective's movements seemed purposeful, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. Rex growled softly, sensing Jake's tension. "Marcus," Jake called out, stepping out from behind the boulder. "What are you doing here?" The detective spun around, his flashlight beam sweeping across Jake's face before settling on the ground between them. "Jake, thank goodness you're all right. We got a report that you might be in trouble out here." "A report? From who?" Jake asked, walking slowly toward the detective while keeping the waterproof package behind his back. Something in Marcus's demeanor didn't feel right. The detective's usual easy smile seemed forced, and his eyes kept darting around nervously. "Anonymous tip, same as the one that brought you here," Marcus replied, moving closer. "Someone called the county dispatch and said they'd seen suspicious activity involving a Cedar Falls patrol car at Miller Bridge. We were concerned that you might have walked into a dangerous situation." Jake felt Rex press against his leg, the dog's body tense with alertness. "But that's strange, Marcus. I just called for backup myself less than 5 minutes ago. How did you get here so fast if you were responding to a separate call?" For just a moment, Marcus's expression flickered, and Jake caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like panic, but it was gone so quickly that Jake wondered if he had imagined it. "I was already in the area," Marcus said smoothly. "I've been tracking some suspicious activity in these parts for the past few weeks. Drug runners, we think, using the river to transport their merchandise. When we heard your call sign mentioned, I figured it might be connected." The explanation sounded reasonable, but Jake's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Rex was now standing directly in front of him, positioning himself between Jake and the detective, something the dog had never done before with a fellow officer. "What did you find out here, Jake?" Marcus asked, taking another step closer. "The caller mentioned seeing someone near the riverbank." Jake made a split-second decision that would prove crucial. Instead of revealing the package, he decided to test Marcus's reaction to a partial truth. Rex found something interesting near the water. But I haven't had a chance to examine it closely yet. I was waiting for backup before investigating further. Marcus's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine interest. But there was something predatory about his expression. What kind of something? Could be related to our drug investigation. Just a package of some kind, Jake said carefully. Wrapped in plastic, hidden among the rocks. Could be anything, might not even be connected to whatever brought us here. Mind if I take a look? Marcus asked, moving his hand toward the radio clipped to his belt. I've got some experience with these kinds of finds. Jake noticed that Marcus wasn't actually reaching for his radio, but for something else on his belt, something that glinted metallic in the flashlight beam. Rex noticed it too, and let out a low, warning growl. Actually, Marcus, I think we should wait for the backup I called, Jake said, taking a step backward. Protocol, you know, chain of custody and all that. Marcus's friendly facade began to slip. Come on, Jake. We're both law enforcement. No need to get bogged down in paperwork when we might have a hot lead on a major drug operation. The way Marcus emphasized major drug operation sent a chill down Jake's spine. It sounded rehearsed, like a line he had practiced. Jake began to suspect that the detective knew exactly what was in the package and that it had nothing to do with drugs. Rex seems agitated, Jake observed, buying time while he tried to figure out his next move. He's usually fine around other officers, but something's got him worked up tonight. Marcus glanced down at the German Shepherd, and for the first time, Jake saw genuine concern cross the detective's face. Dogs can be unpredictable. Maybe he's picking up the scent of whatever smugglers have been through here. But Rex wasn't acting like he had detected drugs or smugglers. He was acting like he had identified a threat, specifically, the man standing 10 feet away, claiming to be there to help. Jake's radio suddenly crackled to life. Unit 7, this is Unit 5. I'm approaching Miller Bridge now. What's your 20? It was Tommy Martinez's voice, and Jake felt a surge of relief. Real backup was finally arriving, but Marcus's reaction to the radio call was immediate and telling. His hand moved decisively toward whatever he had been reaching for on his belt. Jake, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, I think we need to have a conversation about what you found tonight, a private conversation. Rex's growl intensified, and the dog took a protective stance in front of Jake. In that moment, Jake realized that his loyal partner had been trying to warn him all along. The mysterious figure in the woods, the delayed backup, Marcus's convenient arrival, it was all connected somehow. The only conversation I'm interested in having right now is with my backup, Jake said firmly, his hand moving to his own radio. Tommy, I'm at the riverbank near the old bridge. Detective Thompson from County is here as well. Marcus's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Jake. There are things happening in this town that you don't understand. People who have been watching you, waiting for the right moment. The words sent a chill through Jake as he remembered the feeling of being observed during his patrol earlier that evening. What are you talking about, Marcus? What people? Instead of answering, Marcus took another step forward. Rex immediately positioned himself more aggressively, his lips pulling back to reveal his teeth. The dog was sending a clear message, come any closer and face the consequences. Headlights appeared on the road leading to the bridge, and Jake could hear the familiar sound of Tommy's patrol car approaching. Marcus glanced toward the lights, and Jake saw something that looked like resignation cross his face. This isn't over, Jake, Marcus said quietly. What you found tonight, it's just the beginning. There are people who've invested too much to let one honest cop bring everything down. With that cryptic warning, Marcus began backing toward his sedan. Rex tracked his every movement, maintaining his protective stance until the detective was back in his car and driving away into the night. Tommy's patrol car pulled up just as Marcus's taillights disappeared around a bend in the road. Jake stood by the riverbank, clutching the waterproof package and trying to process what had just happened. Rex remained alert, watching the spot where Marcus had been standing as if the threat might return at any moment. Tommy Martinez stepped out of his patrol car with the casual confidence that Jake had always admired about his fellow officer. At 28, Tommy was 3 years younger than Jake, but he had grown up in Cedar Falls and knew every inch of the surrounding wilderness. His easy smile and genuine concern for the community had made him one of the most beloved officers on the small police force. "Man, you look like you've seen a ghost," Tommy said as he approached, his flashlight beam sweeping across the riverbank. "What the heck happened out here? And was that really Detective Thompson I just passed on the road?" He was driving like he was late for his own wedding. Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders now that backup had arrived. Real backup, not someone with hidden motives. Rex seemed to sense the change as well, his rigid posture relaxing slightly, though he remained alert. "Tommy, we need to talk," Jake said, holding up the waterproof package. "And we need to be very careful about who else we involve in this conversation." Tommy's expression grew serious as he took in Jake's tone and the mysterious package. "What are you talking about, partner? You're starting to worry me." "Rex found this hidden in the rocks by the water," Jake explained, walking over to his patrol car where they could use the headlights for better illumination. "But that's not the strangest part. Marcus Thompson showed up here before you did, claiming he was responding to some anonymous tip about me being in danger." "That doesn't make sense," Tommy said, frowning. "I was the only backup unit dispatched to your location. And besides, Marcus works county cases. He wouldn't normally respond to a Cedar Falls call unless we specifically requested county assistance." Jake carefully placed the package on the hood of his patrol car, using his flashlight to examine the waterproof seal more closely. "That's what I thought too, but Marcus seemed very interested in what I might have found out here, almost like he knew this package existed." Tommy moved closer, his own flashlight adding to the illumination. "You think he was involved in placing it here?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Jake admitted, but Rex didn't trust him. "You know how good Rex is at reading people. He's never reacted to a fellow officer like that before." Rex padded over to join them, sniffing at the package and whining softly. The dog's behavior suggested he found the contents significant, but not dangerous in the traditional sense. "Should we call it in?" Tommy asked, looking uncertainly at the package. Jake hesitated. "That's what I'm not sure about. Marcus's reaction when I mentioned backup was arriving made me think maybe we shouldn't trust everyone in our communications tonight." The two officers looked at each other in the harsh glare of the patrol car headlights. They had worked together for over 2 years, and Jake had never doubted Tommy's integrity or loyalty. If there was anyone he could trust with whatever was inside that package, it was Tommy Martinez. "Let's see what we're dealing with first," Jake decided. Then we can figure out who to call." Using his knife to carefully cut through the waterproof seal, Jake opened the package while Tommy held both flashlights steady. Inside were several manila folders containing what appeared to be official documents, photographs and computer printouts. As Jake spread the contents across the hood of the car, both officers realized they were looking at something far more serious than either had anticipated. "Holy cow," Tommy whispered. Picking up one of the photographs, "Jake, this is Mayor Wells meeting with someone I don't recognize. Look at the timestamp. This was taken last week at the old warehouse district." Jake examined another set of documents that appeared to be financial records. The papers showed a series of transactions involving the Cedar Falls Municipal Development Fund, but the amounts and recipients didn't match anything he remembered from the public budget meetings he occasionally attended. "These are bank statements," Jake said, his voice tight with concern. But look at these account numbers. I don't think these are official city accounts. Tommy was studying a different folder that contained what looked like correspondence between several people. Jake, you need to see this. These are emails between Mayor Wells, City Administrator Richard Foster, and someone identified only as MT. MT, Jake repeated, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. Marcus Thompson. The emails detailed a complex scheme involving the redirection of federal grant money intended for infrastructure improvements in Cedar Falls. Instead of being used for road repairs and utility upgrades as publicly announced, the funds were being diverted through a series of shell companies and private accounts. This is massive, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. If these documents are authentic, we're looking at embezzlement on a scale that could bankrupt the entire town. Jake continued reading through the papers, finding evidence of forged permits, falsified inspection reports, and construction contracts awarded to non-existent companies. The scheme appeared to have been operating for at least 2 years, systematically draining resources while maintaining the appearance of legitimate municipal operations. But why would someone hide this evidence here? Tommy asked, and why call in an anonymous tip to bring you specifically to this location? Rex suddenly lifted his head and looked toward the forest, his ears pricked forward. Both officers immediately stopped talking and listened carefully. After a moment, they heard the distant sound of an engine starting up somewhere in the woods. Someone's been watching us, Jake said grimly. Probably waiting to see if we'd find the package and what we'd do with it. Tommy gathered up the documents and photos, his hands shaking slightly as the full implications of their discovery sank in. Jake, if Mayor Wells is involved in this, and Marcus Thompson is working with her, then we can't trust normal channels. We don't know how deep this conspiracy goes. And if they've been watching me specifically, Jake added, then they probably know about my background in military investigations. They might think I'm more likely to recognize what these documents mean and know how to act on them. Rex's attention was still focused on the forest, and he began moving in that direction, clearly wanting to investigate whatever had caught his interest. Jake called him back, not wanting to risk exposing them to whatever surveillance might still be active in the area. We need to get out of here, Jake said, carefully placing all the documents back into the waterproof package. But we also need to figure out our next move. If we're right about this conspiracy, then we can't use normal police channels to report it. Tommy nodded, his young face showing a maturity that Jake hadn't seen before. My uncle Carlos works for the State Attorney General's office. He's been investigating municipal corruption in small towns throughout Oregon. If anyone would know how to handle this, it would be him. Can you trust him completely? Jake asked. Because if word gets back to the wrong people, we could find ourselves in serious danger. Carlos is solid, Tommy assured him. He's the one who encouraged me to become a police officer in the first place. Always told me that the badge means something only if you're willing to defend what's right, even when it's difficult. Jake made a decision that would set the course for everything that followed. Okay, we contact your uncle, but we do it carefully. No police communications, no official channels, and we make copies of everything first. Agreed, Tommy said. But Jake, there's something else we need to consider. If Marcus Thompson is involved in this conspiracy, and he was here tonight trying to intercept these documents, then someone in the organization is getting nervous. They might be planning to accelerate their timeline or eliminate evidence. The thought sent a chill through Jake as he remembered Marcus's ominous words about people who had invested too much to let one honest cop bring everything down. Do you think they're planning to do something drastic? I think we need to be very careful about who we trust and where we go from here, Tommy replied. These people have been stealing from our community for years. If they're desperate enough to set up an elaborate scheme to recover this evidence, they won't hesitate to go after anyone who threatens to expose them. Rex suddenly barked once, sharply, and both officers turned to see headlights approaching from the direction of town. Jake felt his muscles tense as he prepared for another unexpected visitor, but the approaching vehicle was clearly marked as a Cedar Falls patrol car. "That's Chief Anderson's car," Tommy said, recognizing the specific light configuration. "But what's he doing out here this late?" "His shift ended hours ago." Jake watched as Police Chief Robert Anderson's patrol car pulled up beside their vehicles. The 55-year-old chief had been leading the Cedar Falls Police Department for over a decade, and Jake had always respected his leadership and integrity. But given what they had just discovered, he couldn't help but wonder if the chief's unexpected arrival was coincidental, or if he too was somehow connected to the conspiracy. Chief Anderson stepped out of his car with the deliberate movements of someone who had spent his entire adult life in law enforcement. His graying hair was perfectly neat despite the late hour, and his uniform was immaculate as always. But there was something in his expression that Jake couldn't quite read. Concern, certainly, but also what might have been apprehension. "Officers," the chief said as he approached. "We need to talk." Chief Robert Anderson approached with measured steps, his weathered face showing the kind of fatigue that comes from carrying heavy responsibilities. Jake noticed that Rex remained calm in the chief's presence, which provided some reassurance, but the timing of Anderson's arrival still felt suspicious given everything that had happened tonight. "Chief," Jake said carefully, positioning himself so that the waterproof package was partially hidden behind his body. "What brings you out here so late?" Anderson stopped a few feet away and looked around the riverbank area, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. "I could ask you the same question, Morrison. I've been getting some interesting reports tonight about activities involving my officers." Tommy stepped forward, his loyalty to both Jake and the chief evident in his conflicted expression. "Sir, we responded to a dispatch call about suspicious activity near Miller Bridge. Jake found some evidence that might be significant." "Evidence of what?" Anderson asked, his attention focusing on the package Jake was attempting to conceal. Jake made a split-second decision to test the chief's reaction with partial honesty. "Something that suggests there might be corruption in the local government, Chief. But before we go any further, I need to ask you something directly." Anderson raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead, Morrison. Have you had any contact with Detective Marcus Thompson from County tonight? Any coordination about activities in this area?" The chief's expression immediately shifted to one of concern and confusion. "Marcus Thompson? No. Why would I? The county sheriff's department hasn't been involved in any Cedar Falls operations recently. What does Thompson have to do with anything?" Jake felt some of his tension ease as he observed Anderson's genuine puzzlement. "He showed up here about 20 minutes ago, claiming he was responding to an anonymous tip about me being in danger, but his behavior was unusual." "Unusual how?" Anderson asked, his tone becoming more serious. Tommy stepped forward to support Jake's account. "Rex didn't trust him, Chief. You know how Rex is usually fine with other law enforcement officers, but he was acting protective, almost aggressive toward Detective Thompson." Anderson looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside Jake, then back at the two officers. "That dog has better instincts than most humans I know. If Rex didn't trust Thompson, that's worth paying attention to. Now, what kind of evidence are we talking about?" Jake exchanged a look with Tommy, then made the decision to trust their chief. "Financial documents, photographs, correspondence. If they're authentic, they show a systematic embezzlement scheme involving Mayor Wells and other city officials." Anderson's face grew pale in the flashlight beams. "Show me." Jake carefully opened the waterproof package again and spread the contents across the hood of his patrol car. Anderson moved closer, his flashlight adding to the illumination as he began examining the documents with the same methodical approach he brought to every investigation. "These bank routing numbers," Anderson said after several minutes of careful study. I recognize some of these accounts. We use them for legitimate city business, but these transactions... He paused, studying a particular financial statement. These amounts don't match anything in our official budgets. Tommy pointed to one of the photographs showing Mayor Wells meeting with an unidentified man near the old warehouse district. Chief, do you recognize the other person in this photo? Anderson studied the image carefully, then shook his head. Not specifically, but I've seen him around town recently. Claimed to be a construction consultant working on the infrastructure projects. But if these documents are accurate, those projects might not be what they appear to be. There's something else, Chief, Jake said, pointing to the email correspondence. Look at the sender identification on these emails. M.T. We think that refers to Marcus Thompson. Anderson read through several of the emails, his expression growing darker with each document. If Thompson is involved in this conspiracy, then we have a serious problem. He has access to county resources and information that could compromise any investigation we might launch. Rex suddenly stood up and moved toward the tree line, his attention focused on something in the distance. All three officers immediately became alert, their hands moving instinctively toward their radios and equipment. Rex, what is it? Jake asked softly. The dog looked back at his partner, then toward the forest again, his body language indicating that someone was approaching through the woods. Anderson drew his flashlight and swept the beam across the trees, but the light revealed nothing unusual. We're too exposed out here, Anderson said quietly. If someone's been watching this location, they know we've found whatever they left here. We need to move this conversation somewhere more secure. Chief, Tommy said hesitantly, there's something else we need to discuss. We're not sure who we can trust with this information. If the conspiracy involves multiple levels of local government... You're wondering if I'm involved, Anderson finished. That's smart thinking, Martinez. In a situation like this, you can't assume anyone is clean until you have proof. Jake appreciated the chief's directness. So, how do we verify that you're not part of this? Anderson considered the question seriously. You don't, at least not immediately, but I can tell you this. I've been concerned about some discrepancies in our municipal accounts for months. I've been quietly investigating irregularities in the infrastructure funding, but I haven't had enough evidence to take action. What kind of irregularities? Jake asked. Purchase orders for materials that never seemed to arrive, contractor payments that didn't match the work being done, inspection reports that didn't align with actual site conditions. Anderson explained. I suspected someone was skimming money, but I had no idea it might be this extensive. Tommy held up another document from the package. Chief, this shows payments to something called Cascade River Construction Services. Have you heard of that company? Anderson frowned. That's one of the contractors we've been using for road repairs, but I've never been completely comfortable with them. Their bids were always suspiciously low, and their completion schedules seemed unrealistic. According to these documents, Jake said, studying another folder, Cascade River Construction Services doesn't actually exist as a legitimate business entity. It's a shell company set up to funnel money through fraudulent contracts. The implications were staggering. The infrastructure improvements that the citizens of Cedar Falls had been promised and paying for through taxes and federal grants were largely fictional. Instead of improving their community, their money was being diverted into private accounts controlled by corrupt officials. How long do you think this has been going on? Tommy asked. Anderson was studying a timeline document that showed the progression of the scheme. Based on these records, at least 2 years. Maybe longer if they were more careful about documentation in the early stages. Rex's alert posture intensified, and he began moving more deliberately toward the tree line. This time, all three officers heard what had caught the dog's attention. The sound of vehicles approaching through the forest on what must be old logging roads. We need to leave. Now, Anderson said, beginning to gather up the documents. If someone's coordinating a response to our presence here, we don't want to be caught in the open. Jake helped pack the evidence back into the waterproof container while Tommy and Anderson prepared their vehicles for a quick departure. But before they could finish, Rex began barking urgently, his warning unmistakable. 3 sets of headlights emerged from different directions through the forest, converging on the bridge area. The vehicles were moving with purpose, clearly intending to surround the location where the police officers were gathered. "Chief, we've got company," Tommy said, his voice tight with tension. Anderson made a quick assessment of their tactical situation. "Morrison, you and Rex take the evidence and head back toward town on Route 18. Martinez, you go with them as backup. I'll stay here and handle whoever's coming." "Chief, we're not leaving you here alone," Jake protested. "That's an order." "Morrison," Anderson said firmly, "this evidence is more important than any of us individually. If something happens to me, you make sure it gets to the right people." Jake wanted to argue, but he recognized the tactical wisdom of Anderson's decision. If they were all captured or compromised, the evidence would disappear and the conspiracy would continue unchallenged. "Where do we take it?" Tommy asked as they prepared to leave. "Your Uncle Carlos," Anderson replied. "If he's with the State Attorney General's office, he'll know how to handle this properly, but be careful. If Thompson is involved, he might have contacts throughout the region." The approaching vehicles were getting closer, their headlights becoming brighter through the trees. Jake secured the waterproof package and called Rex to his side. The dog seemed to understand the urgency of the situation and immediately jumped into the patrol car. "Chief," Jake said through his open window as they prepared to drive away, "how do we stay in contact without using police communications?" Anderson thought quickly. "There's an old diner on Highway 26, about 10 miles east of town, the Pineview Cafe. If you need to reach me, leave a message with the owner, Helen Morrison, no relation to you, despite the name. She's been a friend of mine for 20 years and absolutely trustworthy." Tommy started his patrol car and began leading the way back toward the main road. Jake followed, leaving Anderson standing alone by his vehicle as the mysterious convoy continued to approach through the forest. As they drove away, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were abandoning their chief to face unknown dangers. But he also understood that preserving the evidence was crucial to exposing the conspiracy and protecting their community from further exploitation. Rex sensed his partner's distress and moved closer, resting his head against Jake's shoulder in a gesture of comfort and solidarity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The drive back to town felt like the longest 20 minutes of Jake's life. Every set of headlights in his rearview mirror could be someone following them. Every shadow could be hiding another trap. Tommy maintained radio silence as they'd agreed, but Jake could see the tension in his fellow officer's posture through the rear window of the lead patrol car. Rex remained alert throughout the journey, occasionally whimpering softly as if he sensed the danger they had left behind. Jake found himself constantly checking his mirrors and taking unexpected turns through Cedar Falls' quiet residential streets to ensure they weren't being followed. Finally, Tommy pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. Jake parked beside him, and both officers stepped out to quickly conference about their next move. "We can't go to the station," Tommy said immediately. "If this conspiracy involves city officials, they might have people watching police headquarters." "Agreed," Jake replied, clutching the waterproof package tightly. "What about your uncle? How do we contact him without leaving a trail?" Tommy pulled out his personal cell phone. "Carlos gave me his direct number for emergencies. He always said if I ever needed help with something serious, I could call him day or night." "Do it," Jake said. Scanning the area around the gas station to make sure they hadn't been followed, Tommy dialed the number and waited as it rang. After several rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Tommy, what's wrong, mijo? It's almost midnight." "Uncle Carlos." I need your help. Jake Morrison and I have stumbled onto something big, corruption in Cedar Falls involving the mayor and possibly county officials. We have evidence, but we don't know who to trust. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. How serious are we talking, Tommy? Embezzlement, fraudulent contracts, shell companies, potentially millions of dollars stolen from federal infrastructure grants over the past 2 years. Carlos's voice became instantly alert and professional. Where are you now? Gas station on Highway 18, about 5 miles outside Cedar Falls. Don't go home tonight. Don't go to the police station. Don't contact anyone else in local law enforcement until I can get there. Can you find somewhere safe to stay with the evidence? Tommy looked at Jake, who nodded. Yes, we can manage that. Good. I'm leaving Portland now. I should be there by 3 in the morning. Meet me at the Pineview Cafe on Highway 26. Do you know it? Jake felt a surge of relief at hearing the same location Chief Anderson had mentioned. We know it. Tommy, listen carefully. What you're describing sounds like a pattern we've been tracking in several small Oregon towns. If Cedar Falls is part of the same network, then you've uncovered something much bigger than local corruption. The implications of Carlos's words sent a chill through both officers. They weren't just dealing with a few corrupt officials in their own town. They might have discovered part of a statewide criminal organization. Uncle Carlos, Tommy said. There's something else. Detective Marcus Thompson from the county sheriff's department seems to be involved. He showed up tonight trying to intercept our evidence. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Tommy wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally, Carlos spoke again, his voice grim. Marcus Thompson has been on our radar for months. We've suspected he's been coordinating between corrupt officials in different counties, but we haven't had enough evidence to move against him. If you can place him at the scene tonight, that's the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Jake felt a mixture of vindication and fear. Vindication that his instincts about Thompson had been correct, but fear about the implications of crossing such a well-connected criminal network. And what should we do until you get here? Tommy asked. Find somewhere to lay low, preferably somewhere with good sight lines and multiple exit routes. Make copies of everything you found, multiple copies. Hide them in different locations. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone in official positions until I can help you sort out who's clean and who's compromised. After ending the call, Jake and Tommy drove to an all-night diner on the other side of town. The Riverside Diner was a local institution that had been serving the community for over 40 years. Its owner, Mrs. Betty Chen, Sarah the dispatcher's grandmother, was known for her discretion and her willingness to help anyone in need. Mrs. Chen, Tommy said as they entered the nearly empty diner, we need a favor. Is there somewhere private where we can wait for a few hours? We're expecting to meet someone, but we need to stay out of sight until then. Betty Chen looked at the 2 tired police officers and the anxious German shepherd, then nodded without asking questions. You boys look like you've had a rough night. There's a storage room in the back with a table and chairs. You can use it as long as you need. She led them to a small room behind the kitchen that had a window overlooking the parking lot and a back door that led to an alley. It was perfect for their needs. They could see anyone approaching while maintaining an escape route. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, Jake said gratefully. We appreciate your discretion. In my experience, the elderly woman replied, when good police officers need help in the middle of the night, it's usually because they're trying to protect the community from bad people. You just let me know if you need anything. Once they were alone, Jake and Tommy began the painstaking process of photographing every document in the package using their phones. They wanted to ensure that even if the original evidence was lost or destroyed, they would still have copies to present to Carlos. As they worked, Rex settled down near the door, maintaining his vigilant watch. The dog seemed to understand that they were in a safe space for now, but his alertness never completely relaxed. Jake, Tommy said as he photographed a particularly damaging email exchange. "Look at this correspondence between Mayor Wells and someone identified as Regional Coordinator. They're discussing expanding the operation to 3 more towns in our county." Jake studied the email Tommy was showing him. Hillsborough, Bend, and Medford. Those are all towns that have received major federal infrastructure grants in the past year. "This is huge," Tommy said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. "We're not just talking about corruption in Cedar Falls. This looks like a coordinated effort to defraud the federal government out of tens of millions of dollars across multiple municipalities." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. What had started as Jake responding to a routine call about suspicious activity had uncovered evidence of what appeared to be a sophisticated criminal network operating throughout Oregon. "No wonder Marcus Thompson was so eager to get his hands on these documents," Jake said. "If this operation is exposed, it could bring down dozens of officials across the state." As they continued documenting the evidence, a pattern began to emerge that explained how the conspiracy had remained hidden for so long. The criminals had been careful to spread their activities across multiple jurisdictions, making it difficult for any single law enforcement agency to see the complete picture. They used different shell companies in each town, varied their methods of diverting funds, and maintained legitimate-looking paper trails that would pass casual inspection. Only when all the evidence was viewed together did the true scope of the fraud become apparent. "Look at this," Tommy said, pointing to a document that showed the organizational structure of the criminal network. "They have people in mayor's offices, city administration, county sheriff's departments, and even some state contractors. This is incredibly well organized." Jake was studying a financial summary that showed the total amount of money that had been stolen. According to this, they've diverted over $40 million from federal infrastructure grants across 6 counties. That's not just corruption, that's grand theft on a massive scale. Rex suddenly lifted his head and moved to the window, his attention focused on something in the parking lot. Jake and Tommy immediately stopped their work and joined the dog at the window. A dark sedan was pulling into the diner parking lot, moving slowly as if the driver was looking for something. The car circled the lot once, then pulled into a space near the building's main entrance. "That's Marcus Thompson's car," Jake whispered, recognizing the vehicle from their encounter at the bridge. Tommy immediately began gathering up the documents. "How did he know we were here?" "He might have been monitoring police communications," Jake said, helping to secure the evidence. "Or he could have people watching known safe houses and meeting places." The back door of the storage room led to an alley that connected to a residential street. It would be possible to leave without being seen from the main parking lot, but they would have to move quickly and quietly. "Mrs. Chen," Tommy called softly to the diner owner, who was working in the kitchen, "we need to leave through the back. The person who just arrived isn't someone we want to see right now." Betty Chen nodded and pointed toward the back door. "The alley leads to Maple Street. There's a path through the Johnsons' yard that will get you to the next block without being seen from the street." Jake secured the waterproof package and called Rex to his side. The dog seemed to sense the urgency of the situation and moved immediately to the back door. "What about the meeting with your uncle?" Jake asked as they prepared to leave. Tommy checked his watch. "It's still 2 hours until the meeting at Pineview Cafe. We'll have to find somewhere else to wait and hope Carlos can handle Marcus Thompson if he shows up there." As they slipped out the back door and into the alley, Jake couldn't help but feel that the conspiracy was closing in around them. Thompson's ability to track their movements suggested that the criminal network had resources and connections they hadn't fully appreciated. But they also had something the conspirators desperately wanted to recover: evidence that could expose the entire operation and bring justice to the communities that had been betrayed by their elected officials. Rex led the way through the darkness. his keen senses alert for any sign of danger as they made their way toward what they hoped would be their final refuge before meeting with Carlos and turning the evidence over to someone who could act on it. The night was far from over, and Jake suspected that their most dangerous moments still lay ahead. The Pine View Cafe sat like a beacon of warmth in the pre-dawn darkness, its neon sign casting a friendly glow across the empty parking lot. Jake and Tommy had spent the last 2 hours hiding in an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town, taking turns keeping watch, while Rex remained alert to any approaching danger. As they approached the cafe, Jake felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Carlos represented their best hope for justice, but the events of the night had taught him that appearances could be deceiving and trust had to be earned rather than assumed. "There," Tommy said, pointing to a silver SUV parked near the cafe's entrance. "That's Carlos's vehicle." Inside the cafe, they found a man in his early 50s, wearing a casual jacket over jeans. His graying hair and weathered face showing the accumulated wisdom of someone who had spent decades fighting corruption. Carlos Martinez stood as they approached, embracing his nephew warmly before turning to shake hands with Jake. "You must be Officer Morrison," Carlos said, his voice carrying the same reassuring quality that Jake had noticed in Tommy. "I've heard good things about you from my nephew." "Thank you for coming, sir," Jake replied, setting the waterproof package on the table between them. "I hope what we found tonight was worth the drive." Carlos's expression grew serious as Jake began spreading the documents across the table. The cafe owner, Helen Morrison, approached with coffee for everyone and then quietly retreated to give them privacy, clearly understanding that serious business was being conducted. "My God," Carlos whispered as he began examining the financial records. "This is even worse than we suspected. Look at these transaction patterns. They're identical to what we've been tracking in Washington County and Jackson County." "So our suspicions were correct?" Tommy asked. "This is part of a larger network." Carlos nodded grimly. "We've been investigating what we call the infrastructure network for over a year. We knew there was coordination between corrupt officials in different counties, but we couldn't prove it. These documents provide the missing links we've been searching for." Jake watched as Carlos photographed each document with professional efficiency, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "How many people are involved in this network?" "Based on what you've uncovered tonight, we're looking at least 50 individuals across 6 counties," Carlos replied. "Mayors, city administrators, county officials, contractors, and law enforcement personnel like Marcus Thompson. The total theft could exceed $60 million. The staggering numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. Jake thought about all the legitimate infrastructure projects that could have been completed with that money. All the communities that had been betrayed by the people they had trusted to represent their interests. "What happens now?" Tommy asked. Carlos carefully sealed the original documents back into their waterproof container. "Now we move fast. With this evidence, I can get federal warrants for the arrest of everyone involved in the conspiracy. But we have to act quickly before they realize how much we know and start destroying evidence or fleeing the jurisdiction." Rex, who had been lying quietly beside Jake's chair, suddenly stood and moved toward the cafe's front window. His attention was focused on something in the parking lot, and his body language indicated immediate concern. "We've got company," Jake said softly, following Rex's gaze. Through the window, they could see 3 vehicles entering the parking lot. Marcus Thompson's sedan, a large SUV, and what appeared to be Mayor Wells's distinctive blue sedan. The vehicles spread out in a formation clearly designed to prevent anyone from leaving the cafe. "They found us," Tommy said, his voice tight with tension. Carlos remained calm, his years of experience in dangerous situations evident in his controlled response. "There's a back exit through the kitchen. Helen will show you the way." "What about you?" Jake asked, reluctant to abandon another ally. "I'm a federal investigator with backup en route." Carlos replied, showing them his badge and identification. "I can handle this situation legally. You need to get that evidence to safety." Helen Morrison appeared beside their table as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Gentlemen, please follow me, quickly." She led them through the kitchen and out a back door that opened onto a loading dock. Beyond the dock, a dirt road led into the forest, providing an escape route that would be difficult for the conspirators to follow in their vehicles. "There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles up that road," Helen said. "You can wait there until help arrives." "Thank you," Jake said gratefully, securing the evidence package. "We won't forget your kindness." As they headed into the forest with Rex leading the way, they could hear voices from the front of the cafe. Carlos was apparently engaging the conspirators in conversation, buying time for their escape while simultaneously gathering evidence of their criminal activities. The hiking trail wound through dense pine forest, illuminated only by their flashlights and the gradually lightening sky. Rex seemed to know exactly where they were going, following scent trails and familiar landmarks that guided them toward safety. "Jake," Tommy said as they walked, "I can't believe this all started with a routine patrol call. Sometimes the smallest threads, when pulled, unravel the biggest conspiracies," Jake replied. "But we couldn't have done this without Rex. He's the one who found the evidence and warned us about the dangers." As if understanding the praise, Rex looked back at his partner with what Jake could only interpret as pride. The bond between them had been tested and strengthened by the night's adventures, proving that loyalty and trust could overcome even the most complex deceptions. They reached the hunting cabin just as the sun was beginning to rise over the Cascade Mountains. The small structure was rustic but well maintained, with solar panels providing electricity and a clear view of the surrounding forest. Jake's radio, which he had kept on low volume throughout the night, suddenly crackled to life with Carlos's voice. "Unit 7, this is Special Agent Martinez. The situation at the cafe has been resolved successfully. All suspects are in custody, and federal backup has arrived to secure the scene." Jake grabbed the radio. "Special Agent Martinez, this is Unit 7. What's the status of Chief Anderson?" "Chief Anderson is safe and has been cooperating with our investigation. It turns out he's been working with federal authorities for the past 6 months, helping us build a case against the corruption network." The relief Jake felt was overwhelming. Not only was Chief Anderson safe, but he had been working undercover to expose the very conspiracy they had stumbled upon tonight. "Unit 7, Carlos continued, "please return to the Pineview Cafe when you're ready. We have a lot of paperwork to complete, but the immediate danger has passed." As they made their way back toward civilization, Jake reflected on the extraordinary events of the past 12 hours. What had started as a routine evening patrol had uncovered one of the most significant corruption cases in Oregon's history. "Tommy," Jake said as they walked, "your uncle mentioned that this network has been operating in multiple states. Do you think there are other communities out there that need help exposing similar corruption?" Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "Probably dozens of them. Communities where honest people are being cheated by the officials they trusted to represent them." The scope of the problem was daunting, but Jake felt energized rather than discouraged. Tonight had proven that determined individuals working together could make a difference, even against overwhelming odds. Rex trotted ahead of them, occasionally looking back to make sure his human partners were keeping up. The dog seemed to understand that they had accomplished something important, and his confident stride reflected the satisfaction of a job well done. 6 months later, the infrastructure network case had resulted in 47 convictions across 6 counties. Marcus Thompson, Mayor Wells, and dozens of their co-conspirators were serving federal prison sentences, and the stolen money was being recovered to fund legitimate infrastructure improvements in the affected communities. Jake and Rex had been recognized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for their exceptional service in exposing the conspiracy. but more importantly to Jake, the communities that had been victimized were finally getting the infrastructure improvements they had been promised and paying for. Chief Anderson had been promoted to a regional position with the state police, where he continued working with federal authorities to identify and investigate municipal corruption. Tommy had been accepted into the FBI Academy, inspired by his uncle's example and his own experience with the infrastructure network case. And in Cedar Falls, new leadership had been elected with a mandate to restore transparency and accountability to local government. The healing process would take time, but the community was stronger for having confronted and overcome the corruption that had threatened its future. As Jake sat in his patrol car on a quiet evening, 6 months after that fateful night at Miller Bridge, Rex beside him as always, he reflected on how a single moment of alertness and courage had led to such far-reaching consequences. His radio crackled with a routine call about a suspicious vehicle, and Jake smiled as he reached for the microphone. Every call was an opportunity to serve and protect his community, and he had learned that even the most ordinary situations could lead to extraordinary outcomes when approached with dedication and integrity. "Unit 7 responding," he said into the radio as Rex lifted his head with renewed alertness. Together, they drove into the evening, ready for whatever challenges and opportunities awaited them. The bond between them had been tested by conspiracy and danger, but it had emerged stronger than ever. They were partners in every sense of the word, committed to protecting their community and ensuring that justice would always prevail over corruption. As they patrolled the peaceful streets of Cedar Falls, Jake knew that their story had become part of a larger narrative about the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary differences when they refused to accept injustice and have the courage to act on their convictions. Rex barked once, sharply, as if to say that he was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead, and Jake Morrison, looking at his loyal partner with deep affection and respect, knew that whatever the future brought, they would face it together with unwavering determination and an unbreakable bond of trust. Dear friends and listeners, we hope that Jake and Rex's incredible journey of courage and loyalty has moved and inspired you. This story of determination, partnership, and the triumph of justice over corruption reminds us that ordinary individuals can make extraordinary differences when they stand up for what's right. Their unbreakable bond shows us the power of trust and dedication in overcoming even the most challenging obstacles. If this tale of heroism and hope touched your heart, we invite you to explore more captivating stories in our special collection. You'll find the playlist by clicking to your left, where countless other adventures of courage, loyalty, and justice await your discovery. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up if Jake and Rex's story resonated with you. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human nature and the extraordinary potential within ordinary moments. Don't miss our upcoming content, and we look forward to seeing you in the comments section, where you can share your thoughts about this remarkable tale of partnership and perseverance.